I never believed in love at first sight, at least not until I met Ryan Carter. He was everything a girl like me should have run away from. Too charming, too confident, too good at making you feel like the only person in the room. But when I was 24 and freshly moved to Chicago, I wasn't looking for warning signs. I was looking for belonging. And Ryan? He knew exactly how to provide it. He found me one rainy Friday night at a bar tucked away on Lincoln Avenue, where I'd gone with coworkers to celebrate a project launch. He slid in beside me, ordered whiskey neat, and flashed that kind of smile. The kind that makes you wonder if you've met before or if he's simply made a habit of knowing how to look at women. "You don't belong here," he said, sipping his drink, eyes on me. "And where do I belong?" I asked, smirking. "With someone who knows how to appreciate you." That was Ryan's first move. Smooth, simple, well-placed. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was already on his chessboard. For weeks, he made me feel like his queen. Dinners at hidden rooftop restaurants, late-night drives to nowhere, flowers arriving at my office desk with handwritten notes. He studied me, learned my weaknesses, mirrored my dreams. He played me so well I mistook it for love. It wasn't until a year later, after I moved into his loft apartment, that I began to see the cracks in the perfect picture. Ryan was a strategist, a manipulator by nature. He didn't love people, he controlled them. His charm was a mask, one he wore flawlessly until the moment he decided you were under his thumb. At first it was little things. He'd criticize my friends, saying they weren't good enough for me. He'd joke about how lucky I was to have him, how other men would bore me. He tracked my schedule, not overtly but with casual questions that piled up into surveillance. "You went to lunch with Lisa again? She doesn't push you forward, babe. You've got to surround yourself with people who matter. Don't wear that dress. Not flattering. Here, wear this one instead. Trust me, I know what looks good on you." I told myself he was protective, maybe insecure. I told myself I was in love. But love doesn't make you feel like a piece on a board game. The turning point came the night of my promotion celebration. I had worked my way up to lead a new marketing project. A big deal in my company, the kind of opportunity I'd been dreaming of since college. I wanted Ryan there, wanted to share that moment with the man I thought loved me. He didn't show. Instead, I came home to find him drunk, sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone with a smirk. "Where were you?" I asked. "Out," he replied, not even glancing up. "With who?" He finally looked at me, eyes sharp, cold. "Why does it matter? Don't start acting like my mother." Something in me shifted that night. I saw it, the way he enjoyed my confusion, my hurt. Like it entertained him. Like I was a pawn reacting exactly as he predicted. I found out weeks later that he had been cheating. Not just once. Multiple women. He thrived on it, on juggling them, on manipulating each one into believing she was special. He kept trophies too. Pictures, texts, little reminders of his victories. Ryan wasn't dating women. He was playing them. Collecting them. Winning. Me. I was his longest game. I should have walked away. I should have packed my bags, blocked his number, and erased him from my life. But Ryan didn't just play with my heart, he played with my pride. He made me feel small, insignificant, like I had no control. And that I couldn't forgive. One night as I sat staring at his chessboard, the one he kept on the coffee table, polished mahogany with hand-carved pieces, it hit me. Ryan lived life like a chess match. He was the king, untouchable. Women were pawns, disposable. He thought he could move us around, sacrifice us when convenient, and still walk away victorious. But he forgot one thing about pawns. Given the right move, a pawn can become a queen. That night, I decided I wouldn't just leave Ryan. I would play his game better than he ever imagined. I would turn his board against him. And when it was over, he wouldn't just lose me. He'd lose everything. Anger is a hot, loud thing. Revenge is cold and careful. After the heat of that night, when I decided to fight back, I slept for a few hours and woke with a plan that felt like winter. Slow, inevitable, and precise. Ryan had always admired strategy. He built his life around manipulation, so I decided to use the very tools he loved. Calculation, timing, misdirection. Against him. I started small. First, I erased the emotional clutter. I took down the photos of us from the living room wall and replaced them with landscapes. I stopped answering his calls immediately. I learned his schedule. The clients he met, the bars he frequented, the women who popped up like satellites in his orbit. Information was my first weapon. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into the new project with deliberate ferocity, showing up earlier, staying later, volunteering for presentations. It wasn't just ambition, it was camouflage. Ryan had always loved the narrative that I was the eager career girl who needed his guidance. So I leaned into it, but differently. I built credibility in the office, cultivated mentors who respected me, and, most importantly, learned how to use other people's assumptions as leverage. If Ryan thought I was still the girl who needed him, he'd let his guard down. If he underestimated me, he'd be easier to manipulate. I also began to rebuild my image away from him. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected, mended bridges Ryan had tried to burn, and reintroduced myself to the parts of my life he'd diminished. My friends noticed the change, how I stood straighter, laughed louder, and carried myself like someone who'd learned a dangerous lesson and refused to be small again. That quiet confidence was the bait. He'd been attracted to my vulnerability, but he respected strength. I wanted both his attraction and his fear. The plan had 3 phases. Phase 1, isolate. Phase 2, expose. Phase 3, reclaim. Each step required patience and timing, 2 things Ryan lacked when ego and lust drove him. He acted in the moment. I acted for months. Isolation meant chipping away at his network subtly. Ryan thrived on the illusion of control. If people believed him, his lies held. So I began to see doubts. Not with overt confrontation, but with small, precise suggestions to the right ears. At a company mixer, I casually mentioned that Ryan had a pattern. Small anecdotes about friends who'd felt used by someone they trusted. At brunch with mutual acquaintances, I let slip how people often present one face in public and a different one in private. Each tidbit was an arrow coated in doubt. But isolation without evidence would be empty drama. Exposure required proof. I started collecting it. Old voicemails, screenshots, receipts, anything that mapped his duplicity. Ryan was careless with people but meticulous with digital traces. He deleted texts, changed accounts, and erased histories to preserve his myth. So I learned his patterns, mirrored his habits, kept copies of everything he thought he'd removed. I allowed him to think I was still the same naive girl. I smiled when he strutted into our kitchen with a new conquest on his arm, pretended not to notice the way he kissed her shoulder. That faux obliviousness worked like a charm. He started to show off, to collect, to flaunt. Exactly the behavior that would eventually incriminate him. Week by week, the perimeter around Ryan began to shrink. He noticed the subtle shifts. A client canceling a lunch, a friend returning calls less often. But he chalked them up to bad luck, not intentional pressure. That was my edge. He never imagined a patient opponent. The turning point came on a Sunday afternoon. I had been at the office finishing a presentation when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number with a single image attached. It was a screenshot of a message Ryan had sent to a woman I'd never met, explicit and arrogant. Beneath it, another message: "You need to stop. People are talking." The betrayal still stung, but beneath it was something stronger: confirmation. Armed with that screenshot and the backups I'd been building, I accelerated the plan. Timing is everything with revenge. You don't reveal your hand too soon, and you don't hold back when the board is ready. That night, Ryan came home confident, a victory grin on his face. He poured wine, sat across from me, and began to brag about how everyone loved him. "You should be careful how you talk about people," I said. "People remember things you say and do." He laughed. "What, like you? Since when did you become my moral compass?" "Since I decided I wasn't going to be a piece on your board anymore." The rhythm of the room shifted. He tried to mask his unease with a joke, but the game had changed. The board was set. The weeks that followed were a dance of masks. Ryan carried on with his life as though nothing had shifted, but I could see the unease in his movements. He checked his phone more often, lingered longer in the bathroom after calls, and studied me when he thought I wasn't looking. He didn't trust me, not fully, but his ego wouldn't let him admit it either. The next step of my plan was exposure. Quiet exposure, like peeling away a curtain in front of an audience. I started with his workplace. Ryan prided himself on being the star consultant at his firm, someone who charmed clients into signing contracts and made himself indispensable to his bosses. But I knew the truth: late-night trysts with assistants, favors exchanged for client loyalty, and promises he never intended to keep. One morning, his manager received an anonymous envelope. Inside were screenshots of Ryan's text exchanges with a client's secretary, Messages that would humiliate not only Ryan but the client's company if they surfaced. That same week I made sure another set of screenshots reached one of his firm's rivals. The seed of doubt had been planted. His swagger faltered at work. At home he drank more, snapped at me over trivial things, tried to reassert dominance in small ways. But I didn't react. That was my power. He thrived on reaction, on emotional energy he could manipulate. I gave him nothing but calm smiles and empty eyes, while underneath I tightened the trap. The second part of exposure targeted his women. Ryan liked to keep his lovers separate, each one believing she was the secret queen of his heart. So I broke his walls of isolation. Through carefully timed messages and anonymous social media accounts, I connected the dots for them. One by one they discovered they weren't unique. The fallout was swift. Angry calls, furious texts, tearful confrontations, women showing up unannounced at his loft demanding answers. Ryan's smooth explanations crumbled under the weight of too much evidence. The sweetest part wasn't digital. It was personal. Ryan's pride was rooted in perception, how people saw him, how much admiration he commanded. So I orchestrated the ultimate reveal, a party. He thought it was for him, a celebration of his recent project win at work. I booked a venue, invited colleagues, friends, and a few of his unsuspecting conquests. He strutted into that room like a king entering his throne hall. And then, as the music softened and the lights dimmed, I stood up with a glass in my hand. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, smiling. Instead of words, I clicked a remote. A screen behind me flickered to life. One by one messages appeared. Screenshots of his texts, images of him with other women, recordings of promises he never kept. The room filled with gasps, whispers, the sharp intake of breath. Ryan's face drained of color. He turned to me, hissing, "What did you do?" I lifted my glass and whispered back, "Checkmate." The king had finally been cornered. Ryan never truly understood the silence that followed his downfall. It wasn't the shouts or the tears that destroyed him. It was the absence of loyalty, the cold retreat of people who once orbited him like planets around the sun. After the party, his kingdom collapsed overnight. Clients pulled back. Women blocked his number. Friends stopped returning calls. At work, his manager gave him two choices: resign quietly or face public disgrace. He resigned. At home, Ryan was unrecognizable. The confident, smirking man who once controlled every room now sat hunched at the kitchen table, whiskey in hand, staring at nothing. "You set me up," he spat once. "You think you're clever? You'll regret this." "No, Ryan," I replied calmly. "You set yourself up. I just gave people the truth." And that truth was heavier than any lie he'd ever told. I thrived. My project was a success. My friends rallied around me. Even the women he deceived reached out, some with apologies, some with gratitude. Together we dismantled the myth of Ryan Carter until nothing remained but the truth. The sweetest part wasn't his collapse. It was his realization. One evening he tried to reclaim some power. "You think you've won. But you only won because I let you in. I gave you access." "Exactly," I said, smiling faintly. "You gave me the board. You thought I was just another pawn. But you forgot, pawns can become queens." The final stage of my revenge wasn't public. It was personal. I packed my things calmly, deliberately. I left his loft without a backward glance. Because the cruelest revenge isn't destruction. It's indifference. Weeks later, I heard he'd sold the loft, moved to a smaller place, and was struggling to find steady work. His name carried weight, but not the kind he liked. It was whispered with disdain, with pity, with warning. I imagined him sitting alone at night, staring at that polished mahogany chessboard. Maybe he still moved the pieces, trying to map out a future victory. Maybe he finally realized that all his brilliance, all his arrogance, had been undone by the one piece he underestimated: me. Ryan once believed he was the king and I was just another pawn. But in the end he was wrong. The truth was simple. He was never the king. He was just the pawn. And I was